My constituents disliked Keir Starmer before it was trendy.
Keir Starmer's now gone. I've got to ask you, Jess, would you go back in?
It was like death by 1,000 cuts.
How did you feel when you learned that Starmer had appointed him?
I hated being a government minister.
We're going to use this podcast to reflect on phase one of this Labour government. Now we're moving into phase two. It's another reset. Had a few of those.
It is an actual reset.
It's actually proper.
Yeah.
It's not just a stuttering false start reset. It's a proper reset. I mean, it's a new Prime Minister. And Jess, I wanted to talk to you today about your time as a minister, lift the lid a bit on that. What did you achieve? What didn't you enjoy? What were you glad to be doing? And what you think the coming months might look like. But look, I want to start a couple of years ago, because we're now 2 years into this Labour government. Keir Starmer's been deposed as leader. I mean, how do you, as a Labour MP, process going from a landslide 2 years ago to the collapse of Starmer's government in just 2 years?
No, it's funny because you very rarely look back at it in those terms. Like, I'm sure he is pausing to reflect on it. But when you're in the midst of it, and 2 years 2 years isn't a very long time at all. As you get older, it's like a blink of an eye. Being on the inside within those 2 years, it was like death by 1,000 cuts. The sort of like the salami slicing of credibility and power. Really, you start to see power ebb away from a person. And so it's funny, like, if I were to reflect, like, in 100-year period, it seems mad that, like, in this 2 years somebody won an absolute landslide, and then 2 years later is sort of, frankly, like, really detested by the public, and also like has lost all of the influence over their people. It seems mental when you think of it like that, but when you're on the inside, it happens slowly and it creeps up on you. And look, I came into the election. It didn't feel like a landslide to me.
I know, because you only scraped through,
I only
didn't
scraped
you?
through. I think, actually, and at the time we didn't talk very much about it. Certainly during the election, those of us who were facing real challenge in, like, inner city seats against, and it was specifically against Keir Starmer himself. And some of the things that he had said and done with regard to Gaza and the Middle East. There's absolutely no doubt that I won my election in spite of Keir Starmer, and others didn't make it over the line. People like Thangam Debonair in Bristol, John Ashworth in Leicester. So actually, to me, it never felt like this sort of massive landslide.
It was described as a loveless landslide, and the reason
it wasn't even loveless where I live. It was hateful.
Yeah, but it was 170 MPs. It was
yeah.
a lot. It was just shy of Blair's biggest ever landslide. I mean, it was really knocking on the door of, like, well, it was a sensational win.
Yeah.
But it was called loveless because the vote share for Labour was so low. The point being, it was that idea of a loveless landslide. You felt it very acutely. So presumably when things started to go a bit wrong, you'd already priced some of that in, that it was going to be hard yards for him.
I mean, look, I had priced in from the day before, in fact, the last general election, that that if I won, that would be the last time I could win my seat with Keir Starmer as the leader.
Right.
I've known that for a long time. In fact, when Darren Jones texts me just after the local elections, and he's like the Prime Minister's right-hand man. He texted me and was like, "Oh, how are things in Birmingham now after the local elections in 2026? Birmingham is, frankly, a basket case." But I just said, "Oh, my constituents disliked Keir Starmer before it was trendy."
I'm going to come back to it in a bit, because largely it was about Labour's position on Gaza. It deeply upset many people
of my constituents,
in your constituency in particular. But before we get into that, you just said there, you knew at the last general election you wouldn't win another election in Birmingham Yardley as MP under Keir Starmer. Do you feel differently now that Andy Burnham is in the chair? Could you win under Andy Burnham?
Time will tell.
Okay.
Time will tell. And actually, look, like, and that's what, you feel when you're in the absolute height of the storm. You become very emotive about it when it's your family. And I had to tell my kids not to come to the count. My kids about it because it was just going to be so awful.
Because you were going to get heckled.
Regardless of win, lose or draw, like I knew that it would be horrible and that they, they're young men. They would react badly to that.
Yeah, and you didn't want to expose them to that. That's horrible though for you, isn't it?
That if your job can't be exposed to your children isn't particularly pleasant. So however, like since some of those the bad faith actors that were around then is dissipated, like things are much calmer in my constituency. But I think time will tell whether basically a breakup happened between my constituents and the Labour Party that has existed for a long time. But it's whether he can mend that. I don't know yet, but he has a better chance of it than Keir Starmer.
Well, we're going to come into that, but before we do, and we go back to July 2024, you had a rough election campaign. You were returned as the MP and you immediately phoned up by Keir Starmer to ask you to come back into government. You'd resigned as Shadow Safeguarding Minister over Gaza and the government because you could not maintain collective responsibility over that. So you'd resigned in 2023. Labour's elected, and who does he phone? He phones you because clearly the person in the Labour Party to drive the violence against women and girls strategy is going to be you. You've spent your life working with victims of domestic violence, campaigning for them. When Labour won power, though, you became not a campaigner, but you became the minister. What did you think on the first day that you walked into the Home Office to do that?
I mean, it's funny, Beth, because on one of the first days that I was there, in fact, I think it was like the first hour that I was there, they would come to me because the Home Office gets taken to court quite a lot by a lot of people. And they came with this like, oh, should we appeal this case or not? And the case was one that one of my constituents had been part of, that I had helped forge a case against the government. So you get this very real life, like you were this person who took on this department, and now you're the person.
In the department.
And I remember saying to the Home Office staff, who are honestly what legends, the people I worked amongst. I remember saying very early on in the first few weeks, I said, I want you to know in my constituency office what we call the Home Office. We call it the fucking Home Office.
The FH show. Yeah. It's not just the H show, it's the FH show.
Yeah. So I go into this department for which I interact with all the time. Obviously, I have a constituency of high migration. I deal with huge amounts of domestic abuse, lots and lots. I live in a high crime area. I live in the highest knife crime area in the country. There is rarely a government department. In fact, there is no government department that I work amongst, have worked against or alongside of more than the Home Office. But I was absolutely determined that I wasn't going to take any of those feelings that I had about where it had failed, where it drags its feet, where it does things wrong. I wasn't going to allow that to stop me in my progress. And actually, it's a really weird thing when you're there. Like the civil service is a remarkable body that can literally go from one government with a folder, put it in a drawer, and then they look to you to be like, this is our priority, like these are the things we're going to focus on. And a bit like a dog, when you throw a ball, they will follow it if you throw it and you are certain about where it is going. And because most ministers are not in the position that I was in, is that I'd say in my time at the Home Office, there is one member of staff, there is one civil servant who I think was at the same knowledge base as me and had been working in it for as long as me.
You were a genuine expert, which is unusual for a minister,
exactly,
right?
So there was nothing that they could brief me on that I didn't know, hadn't done all the referrals on before. I mean, so for example, I was in charge of the Modern Slavery Service and the National Referral Mechanism that deals with the Modern Slavery Service, and I was one of the people who was brought into the Home Office to advise them 12 years ago in fact, 15 years ago when that was being built. So, like, most of the people who were trying to brief me on it were like 12 when that
But
happened.
that also meant that they
So
couldn't pull the.
they
Like, I'm
couldn't.
not. I'm not saying that civil service, but some of
Oh,
the criticism is
100%.
that they sit on their
And
hands, they
also,
obfuscate.
when they would say things to me like, "What about this solution?" I'd just say, "Well, that doesn't work." Or I'd go back to, and actually, this one civil servant who had been in the game I had worked with him while I was still on the front line. And so me and him would sit there and go, "Oh, do you remember when we used to do that match fund thing for independent sexual violence advisors? Or do you remember when we tried this particular scheme on sexual exploitation? How did that play out?" We could go back for years and years and years of having done it together, both in the field and in the Home Office. That is a prime position to be in. And I think Wes Streeting once described me as, somebody said, "Oh, how is it in the cabinet?" And I was like, "I'm not in the cabinet." And Wes Streeting said, "No, she's not in the cabinet. She's just got real main character energy."
Should you have been in the cabinet, given that he
No, no,
made
no,
it this
no.
priority?
No,
though?
no, absolutely. I
She's
actually,
just got main character.
she's just got main character energy. I don't think that he should have put me in the cabinet. I think because I was a risk, and I was the only person who'd resigned who was invited back.
Yeah.
Which turned out to be a risk that didn't pay off all that well.
Well, I mean,
but I was a risk. Although I have to say to Keir Starmer, he apologised to me, like, really, really quite profusely after the election, after what I'd been through, and he looked really like quite sort of taken aback by what people like me and Shabana Mahmood had been put through.
do you think at that point he thought he had misjudged his Gaza policy?
Yes, by that point he'd changed it. But also, I genuinely just think he thought I was the best person to do the job, and that isn't an inaccurate reflection.
And he cared, about,
and he
does,
wanted it doing right.
Yeah.
The only job I wanted to do was that one, and I wanted to be like a worker ant in that. However, what I would say on reflection is, without proper power from the centre, me being able to deliver real, genuine change in that became quite difficult because I was a junior minister and I had to rely on the fact that the centre and other secretaries of state would be frightened of me slagging them off about it.
You had Yvette Cooper as the Home Secretary, who was completely aligned with you on the policy.
Completely aligned with me.
And then Shabana Mahmood, who was also aligned on the policy.
They were very different people to serve, actually. So Yvette Cooper, sort of feminist old guard cares so deeply about violence against women and girls.
Do you know, can I just say, I've seen her twice in the past week.
Yeah.
One on a trip and one on a short interview. And every time I see her now, she says, we have to do more on Sudan and what is going on with the
women.
Violence there and the way in which rape is being used as a war crime. And she came up to the back of the plane, I don't think she'll mind me saying this, on the NATO trip, and she said to all of the journalists there, "I want you to cover Sudan more extensively." And it just speaks to what you're saying. It's not performative for Yvette.
She
feels
driven. She is totally driven by the desire. And the only reason we got the manifesto commitment was because me, Yvette, and Sarah Jones, who wrote it together, she backed it. She knew that we had to have a target because otherwise people wouldn't do it. And that made the Home Office really driven by it, which is helpful. Doesn't make other government departments driven by it. Now, when Shabana came in, we grew up in the same Birmingham politics. She's a neighbouring MP. I genuinely have like a sort of Kashmiri spice mix that her mum taught my husband to make that sits in my cupboard. I've been on many sort of battle line, stood shoulder to shoulder with her dad, who was the chair of the Labour Party. So, like, this is a woman I know. The relationship that I had with Shabana was in a way quite different to that of Yvette, where she was like, I am going to be so focused on the issue of asylum, which she has
asylum and small boats
asylum and small boats and immigration, which is this massive political
and to be
thing.
fair, that is why she was moved into it, right?
Because
they were like,
she was basically like, I'm always going to trust you. I'm never going to feel like I need to be part necessarily of these decisions. She's you are my person on earth. And in a way, I mean, both of of the both methodologies of both Home Secretaries was to allow me to just sort of like go off and fly and do it. But yeah, with Shabana, it was just sort of like,
Well,
it was just a total shorthand. She was just like, if Jess thinks it, I think it.
yeah, I mean,
And that is a trust that definitely comes from working with women, working with other women.
women. Now, the government's strategy commitment was to halve violence
Hmm.
against women and girls within a
Hmm.
decade.
Hmm.
How much closer do you think the country is now to realising that ambition?
Long, long way.
Still a long way to go.
So look, like there had to be a cultural shift that had to be done first, of people taking responsibility for it. So with the Department for Health trying to get across that, um, think of it like diabetes is what I said. And so if you think about
Mm.
it like diabetes, what you're currently offering, for recovery for people who've been raped, or, you know, especially those who were raped in childhood, and how they can recover and be like assets to the economy. And it's awful that, like, you know, these are just people, but you have to, when you're in the government, you have to win your arguments by using economic
Yeah.
arguments and productivity and all this sort of stuff, when you know, just doing the right thing should be enough. But like, so it's like what we currently do for victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence in our health services is we say, if you had diabetes, we're going to ignore 98% of you and we're going to give 2% of you acute care at the point you're about to die. So we're going to give you insulin at the moment just before you die because you're already dying. And I was like, but when people come forward and they need to recover,
Yeah.
like if I have a broken leg and I need to recover, you'll send me for an MRI scan and you'll pay for that MRI scan. Whereas if I come in and say I've been raped and I can't leave the house because I've got agoraphobia, because I'm frightened of the situations that I'm in, you say, oh, we're going to refer you to this local rape crisis service for counselling that you can get in a year's time.
Yeah. It just doesn't work.
And then the NHS goes, oh, and somebody else pays for that, so that's not our problem, and they don't pay for it. It was about getting those government departments to understand. And I had people sit in front of me and say, whether it's about like education in schools to prevent it from happening in the first place, saying, well, that's not our responsibility, that's the Home Office's responsibility. I'd be like, yeah, schools is the Home Office's responsibility, you idiot.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like me saying, oh, well, crime in schools, that's your responsibility, I'm not going to send you a policeman. So it was about me really like trying to
Driving it.
shake up the culture that says domestic abuse makes you poor, it makes you sick, it makes you your children sick and poor, it makes the educational attainments of those children bad. Like, why can you not see? We just expected women to take this. So it was about doing that. Now that has shifted in some government departments, definitely, and we are on the way to them taking their responsibility, and therefore, and also we have moved it from being about patching people up to preventing people becoming victimized and becoming perpetrators. So we've had a cultural change about how we half it that had to occur and took quite a long time and quite a lot of me rolling my eyes
Yeah.
and moaning at people. But we are nowhere near still the level of will and commitment it will actually take to half it.
Yeah.
And frankly, finance. The violence against women and girls strategy, if you were to do everything in it, you would probably drop it by about 25%.
Okay.
But the doing everything in it is the phase that we are currently in, and some government departments are performing considerably better than others. What I realised being a government minister is you can make change or make friends. We used to have these intergovernmental meetings, and I'd started to be like, I'll give you a gold star. I tell you what, Ellie Reeves, she always got a gold star. She deserves some praise. Wes Streeton got some gold stars for the work that they did in health. But then I'd have to properly give bollockings to
But you
government departments and say, and I'd have to then go and grass on them to the Prime Minister. And it's just sort of like, oh, this is so tedious.
So was that one of your greatest frustrations, just not being able to drive, not getting enough buy-in to drive things through?
I understand other government departments have other priorities, but it's not my job to be flexible. My
No.
job, I have one job, and it is to stop women having to be flexible about their safety. And so I'm a zealot, really. And that is problematic in government. I don't underestimate that. I am a zealot.
But is that not what's needed to drive it through?
Funnily enough, I've got a number of letters from civil servants who either had worked alongside me and then left to have a different job somewhere else, or when I left, wrote me letters to just say things like, I've just never known, I've never worked under anybody who was quite so determined. If I'd been the minister for, I don't know, floods that happen all over, I suppose then you just become single bloody minded about floods, maybe. But nobody had ever taken the zealotry towards violence against women and girls that I did. So it was like it was a failure of generations.
But you launched the strategy and you achieved a lot. But there's a lot of unfinished business. You quit as the minister in May after the local elections because you said you just couldn't support the Keir Starmer administration anymore. Keir Starmer's now gone. I've got to ask you, Jess, would you go back in?
I don't think I'm suited to it, Beth, is the actual answer. I don't think, look, I won't go back in and do more of the same. So no is the answer. I won't go back and be a junior minister who, whilst has an awful lot of gumption and kudos in the field, I won't go back and just start knocking heads together again. I just it has to be led, and what I've told Andy Burnham's team and written papers for them on it, I have done this work. What I've told them is that it has to be driven by a higher power. I feel like my brother in the 12-step program. It's driven by a higher power. It has to be driven absolutely from the centre. Now, I think Keir Starmer tried to make a bit of a fist of that, but on the day-to-day, so the only thing that I would go back and do is not to be a minister in a government department that is just ballsy and is, everybody knows that they'll roll their eyes at them and shout at them in the meetings, is more, and it's not civil servants I was shouting at ever, it was always other ministers, but is the idea that it is led from the centre. I am happy to do the work. The work is not a problem, and I know all the details. I'm happy to do the work, but it has to be imbued with power.
So
and
when you
will.
say from the centre, it has to come from the number 10.
Number 10, yeah. It has to come from number 10.
Okay.
And in one of the Mandelson furores, one of the demands I made, so every time Mandelson was in the news, I used to make extra demands. And one of the demands was that we had specific special advisors that were about Vorg that sit within number 10. So it is just about beefing up that thing. Also having Vorg advisors who are politicians within different government departments, because that worked really well in health, and coordinating some of that. I'm happy to, like I say, the work is not the problem.
Well, I want to come
but
back.
I'm not going back to it. I hated it. I hated being a government minister, actually. I hated it. I was deeply unhappy throughout most of it.
Why did you hate it so much?
I'm not suited.
Do you think it was
collective.
Because you were a campaigner and
yeah,
then
maybe
you became the establishment, if you like?
Yeah, yes, that. I mean, there were
So,
points at which over Mandelson I felt deep shame to be part of that institution, and so that isn't, when you feel shame about something, especially somebody who is a campaigner, about people not feeling shame.
How did you feel when you learned that Starmer had appointed him? Did you just at that point? Did you just think at that point, I need to leave government?
When he appointed him, I genuinely did not know very much about the Epstein thing. I knew about Epstein. I didn't know about his association with it. But when the Epstein stuff started to come out, I just felt so ashamed. And yes, I wanted to resign. And there was this brilliant moment where I'm speaking to Keir Starmer during that weekend. It was just after the reshuffle, wasn't it? Because it all happened at a similar time, the Mandelson stuff and Angela Rayner. So the reshuffle was happening at the same time as that. And I was in a goat farm in...
In a what?
A goat farm. I think
Why?
people think that when you're negotiating with number 10, you're in like wood panelled rooms. My mates had have a baby, and I'd gone over to
Oh,
see
you
this baby in High Wycombe. One of them was in the military, so they live on a military base, and I'd taken the little boy,
to a goat
lovely
farm.
Sabre. I'd taken him out to. I can really recommend it. I bloody love a goat.
I
So I'm
actually
in
love a
this
goat as well.
gravel car park of this goat sanctuary, like negotiating with number 10, and then at a second point, in a McDonald's drive-through near Stoke Mandeville.
Just lifting the lid. This is real life.
Yeah,
It's
McDonald's
like,
drive-through near Stoke Mandeville, where I did my second phase of negotiations.
can I ask you about also about Gaza, because you resigned over this in 2022 because of the government position on Gaza. You said at the time, I must vote with my constituents, my head and my heart, which has felt as if it were breaking over the last 4 weeks with the horror of the situation in Israel and Palestine. And you said that you saw no route where the current military action does anything but put at risk the hope of peace and security for anyone in the region now and in the future. In recent days, Andy Burnham has now publicly apologised for Labour's initial response, saying the party didn't get it right in the early
Yeah.
months after the October the 7th attack, and that it was too slow to call for a ceasefire. Given that you resigned over this issue, that you know it intimately, that it matters deeply to your constituents, how significant do you think Andy Burnham's change of position is?
Again, I think people will wait and see action.
Yeah.
Wait for action, but it's very significant to apologise. Actually, I think it is, and it's always easier to apologise for something else somebody else did
Yes.
than it
Yes.
is
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
apologise for something you did.
The mistakes of my fathers, not
Yeah,
me. Yeah.
exactly. So, but it is very significant that he has said sorry, because there was a level of betrayal that my constituents felt,
Yeah.
and not just my constituents, but there was a level of betrayal of we thought Labour were better than this. And there was just a really specific LBC interview that Keir Starmer did,
Yes.
and if I were being generous, it was in the wake of the absolutely horrendous sort of pogrom that had happened
Yeah.
in Israel, and you want to show solidarity 100% to there's just like horrendous incident is too small a word, and so I can see where he went wrong. What he didn't successfully do was take that back quickly enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, he
I mean, they would say he misspoke,
he
because he said
misspoke, yeah,
he
but
was
then he
asked
didn't
about
apologise for
he.
at least 6 days,
No,
I
no,
don't think.
he said, and if you didn't follow this, basically he ended up an interview on LBC, and he was asked whether it was okay for Israel to cut off water
Water.
and energy supplies. He sort of seemed to demur that that was okay. Now, subsequently, Number 10 said that he misspoke or he misunderstood the question.
Yeah.
That wasn't what he meant, but they just did not grasp this. In 24/7-hour news cycles as
Yeah.
well, there should have just been an immediate apology
Yeah.
and correction, and that didn't happen. And the damage that has
Yeah, and I remember at the time
caused.
telling him to do it. Like, I was like, it needs an apology. I was helping run the Tamworth by-election at the time.
So what you're saying is it's a good start, but you have to actually back it up with actual
Yeah, look,
policy.
I think people will give Andy Burnham the absolute benefit of the doubt, but I think that, like everything with Andy Burnham, I think he's going to have to come out very, very
Yeah.
quickly, and not everybody, like, maybe I'm not going to be the radical thing that he chooses, like I'm not, my thing won't be the thing, and that's okay, but he is going to have to do some quite radical things quite quickly to prove that there is backbone to the talk.
The talk of
And
change.
the talk of change, yeah. And actually remind people that change won't necessarily happen, but that he's willing to put in place the things that will change things in the future quite quickly. And maybe my thing won't be the thing, and that's the problem, because he's now currently got a lot of people like me clamoring for my thing to be the thing,
Yeah.
and he should just let me go and get on with it.
You obviously back Wes Streeting.
Yeah.
Wes decided not to run. I remember doing an interview with you shortly after you resigned, where you said it's really important that Andy Burnham doesn't look entitled. How do you think he's looking at the moment?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think he's getting away with it in a way that I don't know that other people would, and I don't really
Yeah.
know. I don't really know why. I mean, he's obviously got some sort of
Midas touch.
magic gift. I don't know, but also look, the team of people that he has around him are people that I'm going to say pretty much every. So if you think of Lou Haig, James Pennell, Annalise Midgley, there's something there for everyone, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I know in the country
explain.
this will sound
Just quickly explain, because no one will know who they are.
Understand. Like, so there is some, like, that whatever wing of the Labour Party you are part of, Annalise Midgley is a die-in-the-wall union organiser, negotiator. She is well liked by all of the Parliamentary Labour Party from the years long before she was a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party. She was the person negotiating with us around different policies and always did it with, I know, class and charm. James Pennell sort of puts to, you know, like the sort of, I suppose, if you will, the Wes Streeting wing of the Labour Party. James Pennell puts that bit of the Labour Party's at ease. I think Darren Jones came out and said, like, oh, it's...
thank God James is there.
Yeah. James, there's a man from the 90s.
He's a man from the 90s and noughties. He's a former minister with Burnham in the Blair Brown years, and then he left Parliament, went and did a big job at the BBC, then went and worked in corporate affairs. So he's like,
So, but for me, the reason
is he a greybeard? Is that what, you know, like they call those wise men? They call them greybeards.
I don't know. He looked a lot older than he looked in all the pictures when I saw him in my corridor the other day.
Well,
so maybe we could call him a greybeard. But for me, the
loves running.
Oh,
these
bloody men who love to fit videos of themselves running.
Well, I don't know. He and I have spoken about running in the past. Sorry.
Right. Okay.
Like, and then Lou Haig.
And so Lou Haig is the person I trust fundamentally. And so for a big wing of the Labour Party, and I'm going to say namely the women of the Labour Party, Lou Haig being sort of part of that government machine makes me feel very comforted by it. She's a proper feminist. She's nails. She doesn't take fools gladly. She's very, very, very clever.
We're going to have to come back for part 2 of this interview because we're out of time. But before we go, I'm going to do quick fire.
Okay.
What did the civil servants call you?
Well, they like my name. They call me Jess. You mean did they call me minister?
No, but did you have like a sort of like?
Oh, they bought me a variety of mugs. So one said, "I want what counter-terrorism's got," because I used to always moan that counter-terrorism, which kills far fewer people.
Well, they put it on the mug.
They put it on a mug.
I want what counter-terrorism.
And then the second mug, because they bought me when I broke, "I want what counter-terrorism," not by throwing at anyone in a bullying rage. They bought me a mug that said, "I didn't quit my job today." So they probably just they used to write up my sweariest quotes on the whiteboard outside our office, and you know they had to update it quite regularly.
So good. Okay, next quick fire. Does Andy Burnham's North include somewhere like Birmingham?
Yes, because Andy Burnham's North is in Manchester, and that is an hour from my house and 3 hours from Newcastle. When I was with Andy Burnham the other day, I said, "I think you really come from the North Midlands." I'm sure he loves me.
Did he like that?
He laughed.
Did he like that?
He laughed.
Final question: are you going to run as an MP in 2029?
I think the jury's out. The answer would have been no, a definite no, and I've written my resignation letter already. But I shall wait and see. It might not be 2029. It might be tomorrow, mightn't it?
Well, do you think they're going to have an early election?
No, I actually don't think we're going to. Well, I don't. I think it might be earlier than 2029, but I don't think it's going to be like 2026 or 2027. Maybe 2028.
Okay, final question. You feel more optimistic about the Labour government now?
Yeah, I do feel more optimistic about the Labour government, but I also, maybe it's hard to tell because now I'm not a minister. I've got DMob happy. Hard to tell. Hard to tell which of these emotions is overriding.
Is it Andy Burnham's soon-to-be leadership of the Labour Party for this next phase of the administration, or just
that I can drink more wine in my garden?
All right. Well, look, we've got to go because I've got to release Jess Phillips. If you want to become a member of our exclusive club, it's a pretty good gang to be in. Have a look in the show notes for our Electoral Dysfunction Insider. And we will have loads more Jess in the coming weeks. So, Jess, thanks for joining us. Never go back into government because you won't be able to do the pod again. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.